Good afternoon, East Coast. Welcome to Mind the Gap Live. Hi, I'm C, and this is Mind the Gap. I just wanted to jump right in and be real with you and talk to you about what's been happening with Mind the Gap, what's going to happen, where we've been, and where we're going. We're giving a little bit of a fresh start. I wanted to back up a few months and kind of let you know that I definitely had a really solid plan for Mind the Gap when I started. Full disclosure, the night of the election here in Georgia for Warnock and Ossoff was the culmination of many weeks and months of canvassing, text banking. That night with Warnock and Ossoff winning was a moment for me. It was so emotional and exhausting, and I got up the next morning full of celebration but extremely drained because it was the end of a very long, hard fight. Later that day, the Capitol was attacked by the white supremacist insurgency. From that day, I feel like my outlook on America and definitely my concentration on Mind the Gap and the channel was completely and utterly derailed. Sorry, I've been such an infrequent poster, just unreliable. But I appreciate those of you who have stuck with me and continue to message me and share wonderful things with me on different forms of social media. I'm just not putting out a lot of content, but this week that is going to change. And I wanted to give you a preview of that in a minute. First of all, I want to talk about two major things that have happened in my hometown in the last couple of weeks. I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. We had the absolutely frightful and heinous shooting at the Asian spas. The shooter ended up he had a history of conversion therapy. 7 people were killed, or the 8th person was wounded. But there were very direct ties to the evangelical community, conversion therapy community for LGBTQ people, the porn and sex addiction piece that those of us in the ex-evangelical community know far too much about. So that all happened. We've all been grieving and going through that and trying to find answers. There's the whole, firearms piece to that. I have relatives and friends who have these bunkers and own all these ARs, and they still think that someone in the government is going to come get their guns. Even though Obama's out of office, someone new is going to come take their guns now. And I personally know these people. I know 2 different people who live in the country who actually own cannons and think this is going to help them when the government comes to confiscate their armories. So this is something that isn't an abstract concept for me. I actually know these people. Shannon Watts is a great person to follow on Twitter if you want to get involved. Also follow my friend Melinda Weddy. She's MELWEDDE on Twitter. That's a great way to get started if you're interested in getting involved in that community. But moving along, the Asian American tragedy was horrible. I've been condemning violence against that community for a very long time. They've always been a marginalized community. That's something we've been working through in Atlanta. And then a few nights ago, our governor, who never stops getting himself in trouble, Brian Kemp, signed the voter suppression bill into law. As he was signing it behind closed doors, one of our representatives, Park Cannon, was knocking on his office door trying to get in and watch him sign it live. And many of you by now have probably seen the video of the Georgia State Patrol officers physically arresting her for just knocking on the door, dragging her away in her professional clothing, her representative name tag, her high heels, dragging her across the marble floors of our Georgia State Capitol, arresting her in front of her supportive colleagues and protesters, and hauling her off to Fulton County Jail. The protesters followed the police to Fulton County Jail, and they were protesting outside. Reverend Warnock showed up in support of Representative Park Cannon, and it was just like, when he arrived, he was just, head and shoulders above the crowd of protesters who were being so supportive in that pouring deluge of a rainstorm. She was charged with a felony, by the way, so you should definitely look that up. I won't get into the legalities of it. But she was actually charged with a felony for knocking on the office door of Brian Kemp, and he was in there with, I think 6 different, white men signing this heinous bill into law that includes not being able to bring water for people waiting in lines for voting and a lot of other really restrictive things. With Georgia, it's 2 steps forward, 10 steps back, and we're used to it. And we have a lot of mobilization. We have a lot of great people in place here. I highly suggest that you follow Hannah Joy TV. Hannah Joy is a tireless activist. She runs a great organization called Promote Positivity, and her news channel is Hannah Joy TV. And she has been out there every day for BLM protests, day and night. Now she's out there fighting against this bill. I can't remember how many days in a row she's been at the Capitol protesting it. Keep an eye on Fair Fight Georgia, New Georgia Project. So it has been a wild time in Atlanta. It's going to be a long spring and summer of protesting in Atlanta, Georgia. So if you'd like to join, DM me and I can send you some resources. And since I live here, I wanted to share that with you. Those are just things that are important to me that are happening. We're going to try a new angle for Mind the Gap. I think I've been all over the place and I have alluded to a lot of things happening in my life and subjects that I want to talk about, but I'm not sure I've really ever told you why I want to talk about these things. I think I come from a really strict evangelical background, that I've been in a workplace that was very sexist and outdated. So I've alluded to those things, but I kind of thought maybe we would just start from the beginning and do like a chronological walk through my experiences so that you know that I'm not speaking about something that I'm not familiar with, because I never want to be that person who's talking about a subject that I don't have expertise in. I only want to be speaking from experience. What we're gonna do is we're gonna make this coming week a childhood week. I think it's a good place to begin. Even for some of you who follow me, my childhood was extremely weird. And every time I get a new therapist and I have to go through the story, I'm like, oh, it was pretty weird. And they're like, oh, I've heard everything. And you start telling them about it and they're just kind of like, are you serious? That thing happened. I don't think there'll be a lot of trigger warnings. Absolutely no sexual abuse whatsoever. There was no drug use or anything like that. So we're gonna do Mind the Gap Childhood Week, and I'm gonna share with you the story of me growing up, how I lived my life as the oldest of 5 girls in one of the most strict religious households I've ever heard of. I've talked to my sisters and they've told me they're okay with me sharing pictures and videos. They just don't want their faces on my channel. Childhood week. And then after that, we'll move into my teenage years because some really interesting things happen there. And then I want to tell you about college because that was a crazy experience, being free from that strict upbringing. That is the plan so that you can get to know me from the beginning. And I promise there'll be some good stories and some chuckles, and you're going to relate to a lot of the things, and then a lot of things you're going to be like, even my crazy strict parents didn't do that. Mind the gap.